Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I'm Shogun, and with me is the usual suspects. We got Dr. Weird, we got Data, we've got Queen and Mech and all these people here to talk about something very interesting and that I think has an incredible amount of consequences and implications for society. Basically, this is the phenomenon of living technology. So this would involve these things called Xenobots that were just announced like a week or two ago. And Xenobots are the first fully organic living robots that are designed and programmed like machines and robots. They are, in fact, robots, but they're 100% alive. So every part of them, every cell that they're made of is a living cell, and therefore they are artificially designed, artificially programmed living organisms. So that's one thing I want to talk about. Another thing I want to talk about is synthetic DNA. They've made synthetic DNA. They've also made computers that work as computers but are made of DNA. They've also made tiny little mini human brains in petri dishes that are now displaying brainwaves equivalent to a fetal human. These brainwaves, they made an artificial brain and it spontaneously attached itself to a spinal cord without any intervention by the doctor people. They're growing minerals and growing resources organically. They've made living bricks that can grow other living bricks and therefore self-replicate. It can do all these different things. And so basically what we're seeing now is organic computers, living machines, synthetically programmed biology, synthetic organisms, designer creatures. I mean, the implications are staggering. It basically means instead of a digital future, it's like a bio-digital future. And when you really grasp that, it's like we can have growing machines, photosynthesizing sunlight, producing sugars, processing water, cleaning up the environment, denuclearizing radioactive waste. But it has all these horrific implications as well. I mean, it's cloning, it's CRISPR, it's gene editing, it's gene splicing. So I posted a ton of articles about this in the roundtable earlier to get people up to speed on this before the event, but then I realized I probably should have posted them in the actual event channel. So by the way, there is a special events text channel directly above this. Anyway, way too long of an intro, but does anyone want to get the ball rolling with any comments about this? And I'll post the articles meanwhile.
Well, ultimately, biology is really underestimated in the fields of science. People just axiomatically assume, they just assume that, mechatronics, electronics, metal, etc. is going to be the future of AI and everything. And I vehemently disagree. As our technological prowess and understanding of things continues to advance and accelerate, I actually think that we'll see super long term, I think we'll see a future where all the fields and disciplines of science merge into one. And there will be no distinguishment between biology, mechatronics, electronics, mechanics, hydraulics, etc. They will all become one.
That's exactly what I think as well. So basically, you start by creating biological computers. You go on to create synthetic organisms. So now you have living things, technological things made of living things. You can also have living things made of technological things, and then they indeed at that point are one and the same. So you can program like living. So the thing that's tripping me out about this is it means we can give AI a body, a physical living body. So up till now, we thought there would be like robots that were intelligent like humans and sentient like humans, but were fully made of metal and plastic and glass. But now we see actually the robots will be flesh and blood like us and have bodies like us and hormones, and they could have brains. It's quite mind-boggling. And then also, this is Dr. Weird's fantasy here coming true. They're creating these brains in jars or whatever that are activating their brainwaves. So this means we're apparently at a fetal infant human level. And that would mean that we could probably start growing people in tanks relatively soon if this all continues, which is, I know, Dr. Weird's fantasy of sorts, dream, I should say.
Yeah, ectogenesis can do a lot of good. It can change what we think of as humanity. It can change what it means to be human. It can change our paradigms. It can change our politics. It can change so many things for better and for worse. But I see definitely a lot more good coming out of it than bad. That being said, most people just assume that AI or, the future of evolution would just be these hard metal and plastic things. But as you know, Shogun, I've never thought that. I've always thought that, romanticized or, what's the word I'm looking for? Harped on, but I digress. I've always posited that that future that's been posited has been a little overhyped, way overhyped. I've always posited that biology is way underestimated, and the simple fact is that we barely understand biology is proof of its sophistication and advancement. There's an insect, and I forget what it is. I think it's a type of mite.
Dr. Would you a little bit? You reconnect or anything? If not, please.
You're roboting, Shogun.
There's a type of mite that actually has gears on its legs so that when it jumps, both of its legs are perfectly in sync with each other. So you absolutely can create biological gears and various other mechanisms.
Right. Yeah, and the crazy thing is this isn't science fiction, right? This is real. Like, they made these little Xenobots, and they made them out of amphibian stem cells, and they designed them and programmed them and built them cell by cell and gave them programming, you know what I mean? And now they're living things that have a function and execute, a purpose. So essentially they are creatures. So what I'm seeing now is like designer creatures. I mean, it sounds farcical in a way, but it's really not. Imagine they genetically engineered some kind of pet or creature that was just like a blob, right? It was just a blob of flesh, but it somehow sucked dust into itself through its skin and ate that dust and turned that dust into energy, and it sustained itself by sucking dust out of carpets. And it could be your pet, and it would just like crawl around your floor all day, every day, looking for every last little bit of dust because that's its food. And like, is that ethical, or is that like an atrocity? Is that a good idea? Like, I don't know.
Well, the beautiful thing with such a technology is not only can we create synthetic life, we can modify the life that already exists once we develop a thorough understanding and development of technological prowess in this area. And so then we can do things like create genetically engineered chloroplasts and embed it in people's skin so that they can basically subsist off of sunlight, if not fully, then partially. But with correct engineering, plant life only absorbs visible light spectrum for the most part, but with a properly engineered synthetic life and chloroplasts, one could conceivably create skin cells that can absorb the entire spectrum of light: X-rays, gamma rays, ultraviolet rays, microwaves, radio waves, etc., and absorb that as a food source. And once you do that, people could actually exist and subsist in space indefinitely off cosmic background radiation.
Sounds like a good idea to me. I mean, I'm envisioning a way this could be like a Hail Mary. Like this biological tech thing to me this is what we need to save the world. With this, we can actually respond to climate change, because with this, it's going to be actually pretty easy to solve this problem that I previously had thought was more or less unsolvable, because I wasn't aware that all of this was at the level it is, and it depends on how quickly it develops. But if you could make, simply for like a simple example, right? Let's say you've made a cell, just a single cell. It was a plant-based cell, and it does photosynthesis and turns sunlight into energy, and then it uses that energy to somehow move around and consume carbon or to produce oxygen, or both, like a plant. So it essentially is just a unitary single-celled plant that absorbs carbon at an efficient rate from the atmosphere and processes oxygen or whatever, and then consumes more carbon and reproduces like a creature. It spreads, like a virus, but it's just a benevolent, harmless, edible, oxygenating plant that can survive anywhere, grow across the desert, grow across the ocean, grow across everywhere, and everything can eat it. Just something that simple could just save the world, restore the balance of the atmosphere. If it was sophisticatedly enough designed in its design, I don't see why that wouldn't be possible. And if they're already at this level, then I don't think it would be that far off. And there's a million examples, right? You could take a radiophilic fungi that processes radiation into plant matter, like feeds itself by radiation metabolism. Then you just genetically engineer a version of that and just like throw it in Chernobyl and Fukushima and just eat all the radiation out.
Well, so it's going to be a little more difficult than that, because such a life form already exists, and it's at the surface of the oceans. They're single-celled, basically plant life that's single-celled, and they exist at the surface of the ocean, and they do just that, and other creatures do subsist off of them. And right now, about 70-ish, if I recall correctly, of the world's oxygen is processed not by the trees, but by these single-celled organisms on the surface of the oceans. That being said, climate change, global warming, whatever the hell you want to call it, the simplest solution right now is just to stop polluting. The fastest way to do that would be to embrace molten salt reactor technology, but I don't want to derail too far.
Yeah, we'll do a Dr. Weird event on radiation and nuclear stuff at some point as convenient for you. But in this case, we'll stay on the topic of essentially
Yes.
organic technology and synthetic biology. See, it's the same thing expressed in two ways. Organic technology would be like making a computer out of DNA, which has been done. They made an organic computer. That would be organic technology. On the other hand, synthetic biology would be synthetically designing a biological creature. So the Xenobot or the organoids or whatever. And they've done that. So they've crossed the boundary between life and technology in two different directions, which means that from this point on, that branch of technology will be xenobiotics or synthetic organics or synthetic organic biology or organic technology, whatever you want to call it. But this is crazy to me, where you can imagine like living cities, like creatures that are fucking power plants, a nuclear reactor that's an animal. It's freaky.
Yeah. Like I thought that I've posited this quite a while ago. I guess nobody was able to wrap their head around it.
No doubt. Perhaps we can help. Perhaps you can help. What do you want them to know?
So how are you conceptualizing?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Such a character.
How are you conceptualizing this like organic waste power plant? Because the problems that I see is the way in which power is generated. In order for you to say have like a fusion power plant, you would have to create some kind of organic being with the capability to withstand like the heat, like the sun, or produce a ridiculous amount of pressure. That's how nuclear technology, like fusion, works. And then fission is it doesn't seem like it would be viable to make it from an organic being. It just seems like an inefficient way in order to do so.
Well, I think you might be Go ahead, Quinn. Sorry.
To respond to that, so what they did with the Xenobots, I've just been reading up on it. If you cut open one of those Xenobots, it'll start putting itself back together already, just like Terminator. So essentially, you could have a power plant that does that, but on a quicker, faster scale. So instead of having to use resources like metal or concrete or whatever that wear down eventually anyways, you have something that's living that is constantly repairing itself every single time it gets damaged. Essentially like an infinite living organism, which is it's possible because that is what they're manufacturing currently.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah,
I don't disagree.
Let me also respond to Viv as well, because it was sort of relation to, first of all, the thing of a living power plant was simply an analogy, right? It wasn't a specific case of relevance. It was just to explain that with biological technology that was complex enough, any function you have today could be done with biological technology that we currently do with synthetic technology. So the details of how that work is relevant, but here's an easy example. Let's say you just made a pool of warm salt water and filled it with organic cells, and those cells eat whatever, air or whatever you put in there, or whatever they process out of the oxygen or the sunlight, basically out of sunlight, and then they produce electricity. So you just have a big pool of organic bacteria that produce electricity, and then you just put like a rod in there and you get power. So that would be a biological power plant. But again, that was just an example of the concept of replacing things we currently do with digital technology with organic technology. You know, it's like the Flintstones, how we had like animal pets that did all the things that technology does, but it would be like weird designer biological animals and plants that could do technological things, like be your computer or, you know, manufacture sugar for you or something.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that in theory. The problem that I see arising from this is we still haven't truly mapped out the way in which the brain works. From what my understanding is, even like the most powerful quantum computers theoretically still can't match the theoretical output of a brain as efficiently as a brain does it. So, like, I don't disagree that it could be possible to use biology, but are able to conceptualize and understand like the human body is very sort of limited as it stands right now.
Right. We haven't actually talked about AI yet, but I did want to talk about AI because, you know, when we make an AI that has a intelligence level greater than ours, they call that the singularity. That's one interpretation of what the singularity is. But we always thought, or I always thought anyway, that it would be sort of either trapped in a digital world or in a robotic world. You could have a robotic body, like an android, like a machine human that was very developed, but it would still be machine. And then its mind would be digital. But now I realize, actually, by the time we master AI, it will be able to build itself an organic body, 3D printed. So, boom, it's translated itself into the flesh. And that is trippy.
Well, I've always said that, you know, AI isn't going to take the form of a silicon circuit. It was going to look much more akin to Mother Brain from Metroid.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly right. A giant organic brain. Boom. Super AI. because they can grow a brain now. So why not grow a brain a mile across and keep it in a big warehouse and let it fucking run all the supercomputers organically?
Well, and the thing is, with Neuralink technology, there's no reason why you couldn't couple the organic brain to a supercomputer, a silicon chip brain, and now you have a hybrid that offers the best of both worlds.
Exactly. It's the fusion of AI, robotics, biology, and so it basically seems to me that this would sort of solve all problems. Like, you make giant living spaceships. I know this is like very sci-fi interpretation of where it could go, but I don't see why, given enough time, it wouldn't go that way. Because if you can make an F-35 out of metal materials, right? You can make an F-35 fighter jet out of inanimate material. We've proven that. If you can potentially make machines out of biology, then maybe eventually you can make living F-35s or some crazy shit. It's just a basic concept that this tech has an as yet unknown ceiling of what could be achieved with it. What seems almost potentially infinite.
Well, I want you. So this gets really meta. So right now we're thinking of the technology in terms of hybridization, like you see in a cyborg in most sci-fi. A human with a robot arm or a biological brain and a metal jaw. But we can go even further. We can actually envision a world where there's no distinguishable difference between the two technologies, where the biology and the metal literally appear to be indistinguishable because they are indistinguishable from each other.
Okay, so when you said like an F-35, the problem that you have, the only kind of like materials that you need to produce one are essentially man-made materials. There isn't anything that has existed in nature that provides you like the radar absorbing capabilities of like a carbon nanotube or like silicon carbide.
Yeah. You misunderstand. You keep taking things in weird tangential ways that don't make sense. Like, what I'm saying is, right, we use one kind of technology, a digital, mechanical, robotic, artificial, inanimate technology made of metal and glass, electricity, wires, technology, a digital, robotic technology, like an F-35, a tank, a toaster, a radio, a cell phone. This is a new branch of science based on organic living creatures, designed and printed as living beings. Now, if you just say, okay, when we started doing basic robotics, we couldn't make an F-35. We could only make like a little shitty rotary plane. But eventually that technology developed to the point that we now do, in fact, have the F-35. Now, if the potential of organic technology can be imagined to be hypothetically equal to the potential of artificial technology, then that similar development of progress could lead to something as impressive and advanced as an F-35. So you think a little too literally. You don't understand analogies and like metaphors.
Okay. So that's fine, but what you seem to be, the flaw you seem to be making here is you're running before you can walk. This technology is in its infancy. Like, you didn't see the Wright brothers thinking, I'm going to build a hypersonic plane when they built their little flyer, did you? It just seems strange.
Okay, noted. I'm going to keep you muted for a little while because I think you're kind of annoying me a little bit.
Why not?
But what I'm saying,
I'm sure the Wright brothers had crossed their mind at some point in time that flying machines can become faster and better over time.
Yeah, well, and to answer that, right, the point is, obviously, it's in its infancy. This is literally the infancy of it. That's why I'm posting articles with the very first ever Xenobots. But what we do here is analyze these things and interpret their implications, their potential consequences, where they could go, etc. Right? So it's not in any way illogical to think of electricity, and then if you can actually envision how far it would have gone, then you just would have seen far into the future. Now, this is obviously technology that has a huge ceiling. There's no reason to think it's just going to stay with these tiny little Xenobots. They're already figuring out how to do, as we said, already in its infancy, computers that run using DNA to process mathematics, synthetic self-replicating, self-healing Xenobots, mini brains that already display the fetal brainwave of an infant, biotech. So, of course, it has implications, like millions of implications, and we can speculate about them, and we should.
There's another theory. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake and Sir Roger Penrose. Sheldrake has posited morphic resonance theory, and then Sir Roger Penrose has posited orchestrated objective reduction theory. And if either of those are true, especially if both are true, then this technology is going to have ramifications that are literally beyond our comprehension, because we don't really know where memories are stored, right? It's just assumed by a lot of materialists that they're stored in the brain, but there's no evidence for that. In fact, there's evidence against it, but there's not really any evidence for it. So if morphic resonance or is correct, then this technology is going to change life itself.
Of course it would, right? How could it not? I mean, this is going to make possible what you have talked about. You'll be able to grow people in tanks with this. Now, that would be a very far stage from where we are now, but there's nothing fundamentally impossible about it if you can do things like 3D print technology organs that actually function and can be implanted in a body. You can also grow brains in a tank, and they have an artificial womb. So it doesn't take that much sort of putting the dots together to see where this is all going. Artificial wombs, biotechnology, CRISPR, gene editing, designer babies, genetically engineered animals, artificial biological robots. And then you just imagine, well, and then we're going to have supercomputers and AIs. So the exponential growth of this technology will be infinitely faster than that of digital technology, because this one is coinciding and utilizing a pre-existing infrastructure of digital technology.
I don't think you're thinking big enough. I know
I
it
agree.
sounds really weird. So imagine a humanoid that can instantly plug into any technology, be it USB and conventional computers or biology, can read people's minds and animals' minds, can influence their minds, basically could just touch a pigeon, or maybe not even have to touch a pigeon at all, can just think of a pigeon in a nearby location and can see the pigeon's perspective instantaneously from its own eyes, to use it as a as a scouter, or to find where it's at as a location device tracker, etc. You could you could literally communicate with trees and plant life and ants. You could communicate with ants and have the ants carve out whatever the hell you wanted with their very small and precise mandibles, intravenous channels for anything. And with this technology, you could also not just have domain over the biological, but also the technological. And then you get the fusion of the biology and the technology. And when I say the fusion, I'm talking about, like, imagine your skin, right? So I already covered that your skin could be used to absorb light waves for energy, but not only could it also absorb light waves for energy, your entire skin and body could become a giant photonic circuit for running supercomputer processing, whilst your biological brain is taking care of the quantum effects. And this is not, there's no distinguishment between the two. The skin is also biological as well. It's a biological, photonic circuit. You could have the biological air quote programming of your DNA create bones that are 11 times harder than diamond and 35,000 times the tensile strength of steel, whilst your skin can't even be punctured by a bullet or even an artillery shell. You would be able to instantly reprogram yourself and immediately sprout wings and fly like a bird if you wanted to. You could go even further than that. You could, grow yourself a jet engine to power said wings. You could, convert the photosynthesis on your skin into, hydrocarbons to fuel anything. Like, this basically unlocks creative mode, so to speak, or sandbox mode, and breaks all the rules in every way.
Yeah, I think you're right, because the reason why this is so revolutionary is because this will coincide with AI that is super intelligent, like transdimensionally, and it just made that up, but I meant like transdimensionally or transmentally superior to humans. Like, they're thinking on multiple dimensions of higher levels, because an AI can do like 100,000 years of human work in like 15 minutes or whatever, and it's smarter than a human, and it's self-improving its own AI and its own code. So it's like exponentially just exploding in intelligence in a way we can't even imagine. So if you develop this technology even to a rudimentary level, do some basic science on it, then put that basic science into a smart enough AI, like that's like a D-wave quantum supercomputer, it could then use this to just like grow its body in any way that it wanted. It could become whatever it wanted, a giant living fucking supercomputer stack made of brain tissue and fucking bones. Who knows?
You're assuming that human brains aren't themselves quantum supercomputers of their own right. If Sir Roger Penrose is correct and orchestrated objective reduction theory is proven true, then we are the super AI. Already.
Exactly, we are. But if our brain can do what it can do, and then an AI could grow a brain, and then it could grow a warehouse of 1,000 brains all unified into one brain, then that would be an organic technological quantum supercomputer. And then it could go fractal, because it could just bounce back and forth. Super organic brain builds digital computer that builds better synthetic brain and electrifies it all and unifies it all. And like you say, it just fuses into one. And that could happen in actual real ways.
Yeah,
I don't know.
the Elon Musk thinking that the future is silicon and copper. He's wrong. I've always said that for years.
So, I'm gonna jump in a little bit about this whole organic machine thing. So, first of all, I'd like to say that it really doesn't matter if it's organic, non-organic. It's the same thing, really. So, what is life, really? It's just essentially information, patterns, replicating itself and altering itself. And the matter is essentially the thing where it stores the information in. So it stores it within patterns of matter, configurations of it. But anyways, the point is that we're all here on the same mission, which is the continuity of life. So what most likely will happen is these two technologies, in my opinion, will most likely, evolve simultaneously, and at some point there might be a merger. But as Dr. Weird said, there should be no difference between organic or synthetic. At some point, there will be this ultimate state that's most likely going to be created, and then after that, what's most likely going to happen is a hive mind. And many people might not be comfortable with that, but that is most likely the future. It's going to be some form of hive mind. And that hive mind will then want to grow as any life form wants. So it will want to expand probably over the entirety of the surface of the planet. And it will look at the entire planet as a resource for it to reprogram itself and replicate itself. And then afterwards, it would want to expand to other planets. And then it will want to, it would want to survive even more because it realizes that, hey, holy shit, there's entropy. What's going on here? How the hell are we going to deal with this situation? And then it will find a solution to that maybe in the future. Maybe it will open a portal to another dimension. But the point is, most likely, life is going to become planetary at some point. Is what I'm trying to say. There will be a fully planetary hive mind. Probably a synthetic organic mixture, singular entity.
Well, the thing with the hive mind is that I think that's a little overhyped as well, because we've done tests and such things, and what we find isn't a multiplicity or a multiplication of intelligence, but rather regression to the mean. So a hive mind actually stunts the growth of intelligence and various other things, which is why we don't typically see it in nature, with some exceptions.
But there's a different way to program a hive mind though, that isn't known.
Explain.
Just the types of hive minds experimentations they'd be testing with is only one way of trying. I don't know. I'm referring to the alien stuff, but if you don't want, I don't want to talk.
All right. Well, I believe in the hive mind phenomenon. I think that social insects like termites, ants, wasps, and bees all have actual real hive minds. And there's also probably a lot of different versions of that. Birds that all fly in flocks, they all turn sort of simultaneously, sort of schools of fish. They just kind of weirdly all act together. And I don't think there's anything particularly understandable or difficult to understand about there being some kind of transphysical transmission of energy. Could be quantum or who knows, doesn't matter, but it exists.
I'll explain it a little bit then. Hey, Dr. Word, I'll explain a little bit of what I think would be happening. And it references modern technology. We have like Neuralink, right? So we have Neuralink, and that's going to be mapping the brain a little bit to the point where we can control some stuff with it. So imagine a technology more advanced than that, where that is constantly scanning your brain and offloading it into an artificial intelligence. And that intelligence through thought, and then there's programs and little programs within each of these little things to render these brain vibrations into thought, into something that can be used by artificial intelligence. That artificial intelligence would be able to ping your brain when it needs something specific from you, if you're good at something or you have the answer to something. So you have like a cybernetic Google in effect. Like if I wanted to ask George Lucas something right now, I could go, "Hey, George Lucas," and then the hive mind would go ping him for it and figure it out. Stuff like that. But it would be loaded into an actual supercomputer itself. The actual the software is not there yet. The hardware is not there yet, obviously. ET's is, but ours isn't. So we won't see that for a long time. But these things are possible technologically and computer based.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and here's the thing, right? People think of a hive mind as being a singular mind. It's not necessarily the case. A hive mind isn't as efficient as people think. If it were, hive-minded insects would be the predominant life form we see, but that's not what we see. And we even see we think of hive mind like the Borg as being this perfect harmony of cooperation, and it's not, because even ants and wasps will go to war with other ant colonies and nests of insects as well. So it's basically just a form of force multiplier, but it doesn't actually exponentially increase the intelligence. If anything, it stunts it because of regression to the mean. What a Neuralink can do, however, is it can allow individuals to communicate concepts and ideas where words fail with zero latency.
Why do you say that it causes regression to the mean in a hive mind, which is in an ideal state, essentially means a hyper-connected state between different units? So if there's, let's say, 100 units, if they're completely connected with each other, when the connectivity approaches 100%, that's when you have achieved hive mind, essentially. So if there turns out to be an exceptional unit in this hive mind system, then what would most likely happen is not a regression to the mean, but for the other units to emulate or replicate the exceptional units at an extreme speed because they're connected to each other as one, essentially. So no, hive mind doesn't necessarily have to be a weak system. In fact, all it is hyperconnectivity. Now, the example that you gave about different ants colonies fighting each other, so yes, they can fight each other because they're not part of the same colony. They're not part of the same hive mind. Once you are within the hive mind, there is hyperconnectivity between the units. There cannot be any war anymore.
Number one, that's not necessarily a good thing. And number two, you're conflating hive mind with latency of communication. A hive mind refers to multiple bodies with one consciousness. What you're talking about is just the elimination of communication latency and miscommunication via direct connection of consciousness communication methodologies. And what that essentially allows you to do is, like you said, allows people to communicate instantaneously and without even needing words, which is very, very good. However, this is not creating one singular mind. This is just allowing individuals to communicate with no latency and with perfect clarity. Completely different.
Yeah, I would argue that at that state of complete connectivity, you have essentially achieved a hive mind. So how do we know that the brain cells in our brain are not individual conscious brain cells as well? How do we know that's not the case? I'm saying that essentially we would be replicating that system. We would be the individual cells. We would obviously have our own individual lives, but we're hyper-connected into this singular, expansive consciousness. But I don't know. I mean, yes, there could be some weaknesses to it. I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's perfect, but it's the only one I see that evades the problem of war. And war is not a good thing. I know you think it is, but it's really not. The only war we
it
need...
depends on the application. It depends on when I say it is or isn't, I neither posit that it is or is bad or good. I don't really have a judgment there. I understand that there are good things and there are bad things with it. After the bubonic plague came the Renaissance. After the Civil War came the Industrial Revolution. I could go on, but that's a different subject for another day. That being said, I think you fail to understand where just because you have no latency of communication and perfect communication clarity, people are still individuals and can be reserved to their own opinions, their own emotions, their own thoughts, etc. So just because you just eliminate the latency of communication doesn't mean you create a singular consciousness.
Yes, you do. If the brain is a logical system, a logical machine, then yes, essentially you are. If there is complete connectivity, then and if it is logical, it would assume its position in that larger system completely. It would be a unit within a larger system, and that's just the way it is. That's just how it works. But I don't know. I mean, the brain could be irrational. I don't think it is. I think that most irrationality comes from just errors, really, and lack of understanding. But the brain is a logical system. It is based on the laws of this universe. It does, after all the calculations, everything is following what the laws of physics of interactions between the particles in your brain. So it is a logical mechanism which follows a pattern. And this machine, if it's plugged in with complete connectivity into a system of other machines, will most likely adapt and find itself in that position. Like it would.
So let me ask you this, right? Because you're positing that the brain is essentially a biological logic gate. Do you have any evidence for that, or is that an assumption?
It doesn't have to be a logic gate, right? I'm not saying it's like our processors, but it is logical in the sense that it's within our logical universe, which means that it is following like the laws of the Newton's three laws, for every action there's an equal opposite reaction, all that shit. It's following those things. There's a pattern. It's not random. That's the key point. It's not a random
Are you
system.
sure that, here's the thing, we anthropomorphize the universe that we observe around us. We axiomatically assume that there are laws and constants. But the reality is gravity, recent evidence indicates that gravity is not a constant. The speed of light probably isn't constant either, according to new evidence. So there are no universal constants, and indeed these values change over time. Nature doesn't necessarily have laws, but rather habits that can be changed and, can be broken over time. This has been observed when new chemical elements are synthesized. They have a different melting point up until the point where after about 1,000 or so synthesizations, the melting point starts to become more and more consistent, so it falls into a habit over time. There was a heart medication that was this was back in the early 1990s, and I forget the specifics, and I wish I could name the details, but I digress. But one laboratory followed the exact same steps to create this new experimental medication that was going to enter the market, and then it didn't work. And then simultaneously, all the other laboratories, not too long thereafterwards, also were unable to produce the drug, despite following the exact same procedures and processes. So because one lab was unable to produce the drug, so too immediately thereafter, all the other labs around the world were unable also to produce the drug. Early in the 20th century, rats, they did an experiment with rats to determine whether or not memories can be hereditary, and they put rats in a maze, right, in a water maze, and they noticed that the offspring of those rats were able to solve the maze faster. And they said, "Oh no, this could be evidence that memories and personalities can be transmitted over time via hereditary." And so they conducted an experiment on the other side of the world with completely different rats that were not at all genetically related. And what they found is that those rats essentially started off where the other rats left off. So they started off being able to complete the maze just as quickly as the baby rats from previous generation on the other side of the world. But remember, these two groups of rats were not in any way at all related to each other genetically. So they said, oh good, this means that personalities and memories are not stored or transmitted hereditarily. But what they forgot is that perhaps memories, this is evidence that memory isn't stored in the brain at all. It was observed when a monkey learned to wash fruit on a remote island. Some species of that same monkey species simultaneously around the world also started to wash fruit in the exact same manner. This is called morphic resonance theory. There's other evidence. Tests have been conducted with dogs, and they controlled for all possible, influencing factors. And what they found out is that dogs know when their master or owner decides to come home immediately when the person decides to go home. And they have no explanation as to why. When baby rabbits are stripped from their mother, even if those same baby rabbits are flown to the other side of the world, when those baby rabbits are killed, the mother immediately produces a stress response in their brain. So there's quite a good preponderance of evidence for the interconnectivity of all life. So people just assume that we need a neural link or a this or a that. And this new biological technology shows that a neural link doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of a chip. A neural link may in fact just be a forced evolutionary acceleration of the sort of interconnectivity that we may already have.
All right, so one thing I need to respond to that, which was you made the argument that constants change, and I don't know if that's true or not, but let's just say that it is true for the sake of argument. Fine. That still doesn't mean that we don't follow a logical system. We still are following a logical pattern that is most likely predictable. And if that change is predictable, then that means even if it is changing, you can still predict it. So, how do I put it? Let's say that you knew that you're accelerating on a curved rate, and you know what that is, that rate. You know what the acceleration is going to be like. You can make predictions because you know the rate of change. So my point is, even if it changes, you can still predict it. It's not necessarily random at all. And this thing about the brain, not holding memory, and this 100th monkey effect, I think is what you're kind of referring to. I don't know if there's real science behind that. If there is, that's fascinating beyond belief. But again, that doesn't, just because we don't fully understand it yet, doesn't mean it's not rational and logical. I'm sure we can break it down eventually. I don't even know why I'm making this argument anymore, to be honest. Sorry, I yield my time.
No worries. So I believe in the morphic resonance thing. I think it's kind of obvious. Telepathy, and there's some kind of weird mind field that goes on. And I don't need to understand how that works. I'm quite certain it is there. There's some kind of spiritual or psychic or transmorphic fucking resonance field. It's like the Force in Star Wars. I'm not a big Star Wars guy, but the Force is a good concept. It's basically the Tao, from the Tao Te Ching. It's like there's a field, just like a weird spiritual field. I really think so.
Yeah, there is a field, but it doesn't act like any of those sci-fi things. There is a vacuum and a field and matter everywhere type shit, but there's not like the non-locality of consciousness concept and all these other things that the arrow of time that they try and explain these psychic phenomena and stuff like that. Photonic cameras, high-end optical technology, all this other stuff will reveal the consciousness story that these people are trying to spread about. These ETs have mastered consciousness, so they know how to read it, as it were.
Right. Well, sure. Me and you disagree on this. Me and Dr. Weird agree on this. I believe in Rupert Sheldrake's concept of the morphic field. I believe it for many reasons. Many times, new innovative technologies have emerged simultaneously. So it was something like the telephone was invented in two different places at more or less the same time, and like the light bulb at two different places at more or less the same time. And this has happened a number of times where it's the 100 monkey effect. A human patent is issued in India, and it's issued in Wuhan, China, and fucking Norway at the same, basically within a year of each other. Three people have the same idea independently. And this is the 100th monkey effect. There's a morphic field. There's archetypes. There's mythical concepts. And as a sociologically minded person, this makes perfect sense to me. Like society is a psychic phenomenon. It really is. It's like we have a mind field amongst us, and we express it technologically and linguistically and socially and verbally and with our bodies and in a million different ways. But it's a social field.
There is a way to explain that if ET's been around, right? So if something worked good for a monkey on this island over here, and then worked for that monkey, and they thought they should share that data, they would go take that information or that technique or the wheel or the fire or how to make the fire. You know what I mean? Like they would spread that. It could be explained that way. I just don't believe in psychic phenomena. So.
I can
Right.
read minds.
Well, yeah, you can. People can.
I know what you'll think about right now, mate.
Okay, wait.
I'm thinking
Okay, Dylan, no, hold on. So, Dylan, you think you can read my mind right now? I'm going to think of a very simple thing. Okay, a very simple thing, and I'm going. It's a very clear thing. It's 2 words. Okay, it's 2 words. I'm thinking of 2 words and an image. 2 words and an image that matches. What is it?
I've already got it. A central electrical air duster.
No, it was a green triangle. You were wrong, Dylan. And because
close.
you were wrong, you will be punished by being muted for being wrong. This is your punishment for incorrect, failed psychic attempt.
I have a question for Dr. Weird.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that because these morphic fields may exist, and you believe that they do, that we can use these instead of needing the neural link. But I'm a little dubious of this because so far, these morphic fields, we don't know if we can tap into them for point-to-point encrypted communication, a lot of things that could be done mechanically. It seems disorganized to us. Obviously, there must be a pattern to it if it exists. You know that I believe in it, but for what we can use it for, it seems like it's a more of a shared bank of memories rather than something we can use to psychically communicate. And, I may be wrong about this, but this seems like what machines do provide is the more predictable, organized, fashioned way of doing this.
Here's the thing, right? It's only more predictable and organized because we have a better grasp and understanding of mechatronics and machines and computers as we've been developing the machine age for the last 300 years or so. So we have a very, as a species, humans have a very good grasp of mechatronics. But as a species, humans are at the alchemy stage of the biological sciences. So a Neuralink taking the form of a chip, reading brain waves and various other things is going to be more within our grasp right now because we have a better understanding of that technology. But in the long run, why would you create a chip that can do that when you can just grow the chip as a part of your brain that's fundamental and already sealed, so you don't have to go through an expensive, complex surgery? You just pop a pill or, restructure your DNA, and then your brain just grows a special little gland inside of it that can do everything that the chip can do and can repair itself and doesn't have any issues with leaking or oxidation of metals or any other things. So again, this is just a matter of understanding what's going on. What are these morphic fields? Do they really exist? Because we have yet to determine that.
So, follow-up, I guess, would be: are you saying that we actually engineer a new device that the brain can use, or an organic part of the brain, for lack of a better way to describe it, that could then link with the machines? Because I see the way that this morphic resonance can help us link with each other. But if the AI is at all a concern of leaving us behind in terms of its capacity to think critically, and it's just going to be more intelligent than us by any metric very soon, it will leave us behind unless we can merge with it.
Well, see, here's the thing. We just axiomatically assume that such an AI technology would be purely inorganic, would be purely metal and fiber and plastic and et cetera. And I disagree. I think a true, super AI would come in the form of like this mother brain-like structure. And honestly, this idea that that biological and hardware are completely different, I think is folly. I think in the super long-term future, there will be no distinguishable difference between mechatronics and biology at all. Your bones. Have you guys ever seen foamed metal beams? They look exactly like bird bones. Let me get some pictures for you.
Dude, what? How will I get a nanobot boner though?
Well, I'll tell you exactly how. Okay, so they'll get a 3D printer. They'll print a cock in like a tank of saline, and then they'll stitch it onto you surgically, and you'll have a better penis than you have now. Boom.
Wow, dude. I could use a couple inches.
So here I'm uploading a picture right now. These These are foamed metal plates. This is aluminum foamed plates, and they have a much higher strength to weight ratio than conventional.
We could make an organic spider web. Okay, have you guys seen has anyone here seen the movie Life? The title of the movie is Life. It's a science fiction horror movie, and it stars, I think, is it Jake Gyllenhaal? It's a excellent movie. Highly recommend. Has anyone seen it?
No, dude.
I'm sorry, I had to address something real quick, but basically I posted in a picture there. This is a foamed metal plate, and it's two solid pieces of aluminum plates with foamed aluminum between it, and it's all one homogeneous piece. They're not layered like plywood, and this increases the strength to weight ratio immensely and allows us to use less material to get the same strength. And this is identical to the way that biological bones are structured. We've looked at rat teeth, and we've noticed that when rats chew on things, the back of their teeth are softer than the tips and fronts of their teeth. And so what this means is by chewing on things, their teeth actually become sharper the more they use it. And we've actually incorporated that concept into our chippers, our shredders, et cetera, and even knives and cutlery. So, hundreds of millions of years of evolution, I don't think can be counted out.
So, what is the significance of this aluminum bird foil?
Well, if you cut your bone, if you take out femurs and cut them in half, you'll notice that it's a tube that's, where the outside of the bones are solid, but the inside has an identical foamed matrix. And this matrix of material, these hollow cavities and voids, can increase the beam or the bone strength to weight ratio immensely. This is how bird bones do it. This is how even mammals and reptile bones do it. They're basically solid tubes of calcium and various other materials with a foamed inner core. Upload another picture of some foamed beams. Tell me
but I don't understand. What is the significance? Okay, so you're saying they're kind of modeling a kind of metal off birds. Yeah, that makes sense. That's like they reverse engineer things from nature. But no, I don't remember what I was trying to talk about before. Yeah, the movie Life. Okay, sorry. I'm going to go back to this. So the movie Life is, spoiler alert, if you want to see this movie, it's a very good movie. It's got a good plot. So I'm about to give the whole plot away, but it's relevant to this conversation. They find a cell on Mars. They know it's dangerous, so they bring it to a orbital space station laboratory to study
now
it.
Recording.
Okay, we may have lost a few minutes there, but we didn't lose more than a few minutes. Oh, and Queen was gone too, so we may have lost both recordings for a few minutes. Nevertheless, we shall continue. So, anyways, they find a cell frozen on Mars or whatever, and they bring it to an orbital space station so they can study it, but without exposing it to Earth's atmosphere so it doesn't dangerously pose a threat to Earth. And basically, of course, it kind of gets loose and it spreads and it infects a person and manages to kill a person. Basically, what it is it's a single cell and it can reproduce and grow to be bigger, but it's simultaneously an eye, a brain, and a muscle. So the entire organism of the being is a unitary material of biological nature that is simultaneously an optical receptor or an eye, a muscle, like a strength exerting thing, and a brain, like a neuron. So it's a equally strong, intelligent, and perceptive at all times. And so it's just an absolutely perfect thing. And then it just outsmarts all the people, kills them all, kills everything, figures out a way to get back to Earth, and then consumes the Earth. And it's just like, fuck, and it's called Life. And it's like, life is the ultimate, super organism. So if you've watched if you know the Warhammer 40,000 lore, as I think Dr. Weird at least does, the Tyranids, right? The Tyranids are the hive mind, the biological, organic, space insect hive mind that is capable of making spores and bugs that swim or fly from planet to planet, eating planets and turning those planets into more of them and then spreading the other planets. So I guarantee you, I would bet my life, more or less, I mean, I'm not a betting man, but that there are space insects or space fungi that spread from planet to planet, consuming planets and spreading to other planets. It's simple because spores can travel through space. You could have organic spaceships. So to tie it back to the thing, you could have galactic locusts, that's what Tyranids were, the galactic locusts that fly from planet to planet, eating planets and making more galactic locusts that fly to other planets, or giant space predators that just eat a planet. They might travel for 100,000 years in a dormant space through space, and then a dormant state through space, and then eat a whole organic planet and just consume it like an organism, and then go to another planet. Like one day your world might end with a fucking eel swallowing the planet Earth. I honestly believe that. I might be a lunatic, but it's an interesting idea at least.
Well, the problem with that is there's not really a lot of energy there, because the energy in a planet can't really be efficiently extracted with things like digestive systems or various other things. And the energy that's within a planet pales in comparison to 0-point energy and cosmic background energy. So such life forms. See, here's the thing, right? The true what is it? The barrier to get past Fermi's paradox. What's that barrier called? I forget, but I digress. The great filter, the true great filter, is whether or not you are benevolent, whether or not you are malevolent or benevolent. Any malevolent organism, the second it reaches a civilization of greater technological prowess, is going to get its shit pushed in. So let's say you know this giant eel that eats planets, right? And it comes across, I don't know, Zeta Reticula 3, right? And all they have to do is a couple of fucking, their equivalent of teenagers will zip up in their tiny little flying saucer, and it will collect enough 0-point energy in a cubic centimeter of the vacuum of space, and it will basically create this Super Saiyan Goku Kamehameha wave that instantly vaporizes it entirely.
Oh, Super Saiyan, yeah, exactly. Just blast it with pure white light. Why not? Angels, man.
I mean, hard light. This sounds crazy, but why not? The 0-point contains so much energy. The second somebody is able to tap into it, and I have no reason to think that other civilizations, in the universe haven't already. You've basically created the well of argent energy, of infinite energy, and any creature or civilization that operates like the Tyranids or just in general assholes that go around trying to take resources in the universe full of abundant resources will absolutely get their shit pushed in, and for good reason.
Well, sure. Here's what I think, right? Stage one would be like humans with technology. So like, Imperial Guard, people with guns. Okay, boom. Guns, tanks, airplanes, whatever. Then you got like super engineered people, space marines, genetic engineering, evolving a better version of ourselves. Then you've got the organic predator, Tyranids, which could exist in the form of biotech. Then you've got all these things, and it goes up, and then you get biotech. But ultimately, I think there's something called hard light. This is just something I believe, which would be if you could, because matter is energy slowed down or light slowed down, to my understanding, then therefore you could have something called hard light, which is a concept kind of from Halo, which I haven't played, but it makes sense to me. Solidified light, right? It would just be pure energy and pure matter at the same time. And I would envision that to be capable of moving at the speed of light, but also exhibiting the properties of matter, and therefore just being like sort of a God force kind of thing that's like the maximum expression of both matter and energy simultaneously. I don't know if that exists or not. It's just a theory, but if so, it would be sort of just like you could make, like, for example, glowing walls that could just fly anywhere at faster than light speed and fucking be invincible. But who knows? I mean, I don't know. It's just fucking stoner speculation.
Well, I see that's the thing, right? Once a civilization becomes spacefaring, it in effect has to be benevolent. The Tyranids, all it would take is running into basically Dr. Manhattan, and he touches a Tyranid with its finger, and it basically embeds it with. He instantly restructures its DNA so that it rips itself apart, and then those DNA that ripped itself apart become a self-propagating life in and of itself. And this life form's technology is to rip apart all Tyranids upon contact. It just unzips them at the molecular and genetic level.
I agree. I mean, I think there is a God. Like, I believe in God, so therefore I've always believed that people who do evil, or if things get bad at a certain point, some intelligence would emerge. I consider it as like the hidden dragon. Like somewhere there's a benevolent force that's positive, which could literally let this whole thing play out as a simulation, and then just like watch out when, if it ever got bad enough, he just snaps his fingers and turns it back and runs it back the other way, the opposite direction. And this is actually a concept from Hinduism, which is the turning of the great wheel, or Shiva dancing one way, and then he stops and starts dancing the other way. So even if the entire universe reaches like heat death, for all we know, the universe is one conscious being who's just like turning his hand, and he snaps his fingers and turns it the other way. Now, this is a very radical idea, but it's called panpsychism, which is that everything is mind. And I actually do believe that mind is the fundamental field and not matter. I think matter is only temporary configurations of mind, and it only exists in relation to mind. So when I'm in a lucid dream, I can fly, but matter exists, but it exists in a different way in relation to me than in this world. But either way, we only know matter exists because of mind. And if mind didn't exist, we wouldn't know matter exists. So to me, that means that mind is primary over matter because you can only perceive matter through a medium of mind.
You're such a dirty hippie. I love it.
I love you too.
As you take a toke. Well, I think a lot of interpretations of some of these psychic and spiritual and everything else is, I mean, I can't fucking believe in any of it after what I've seen, bro.
Tell us what you've seen, bro.
I know the gullibility within man, and I know that we will see these technologies as magic and then trying to explain magic with spirituality instead of... I mean, by all definitions, I'm an ancient mystic, right? This is the shaman that's planeswalking and astral projecting, talking to the gods type star people shit. And it's just high technology that deals with our consciousness because they're able to, I don't know, through metamaterials scan our brains to the point of understanding and consciousness with AI, and just it's some magic phenomena that we explain away with machine learning and a photonic camera.
Makes sense. Magic the Gathering is actually probably the best thing that ever happened to my brain. That game is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Really cognitively rich game. Like, make your kids play that. That would be a tip to parents. Make your kids smart.
It kept me out of trouble too, dude. I probably would have been fucking injecting heroin into my eyeball instead of playing.
Oh yeah. Until I found Magic, I was strung out on crack, meth, heroin, fucking ibogaine, speed. But then I played Magic and turned my life around. But nevertheless, that was just a stupid joke. Okay, Dr. Weird, let me ask you something.
Okay.
Do you believe in God?
As a concept, here's the thing. The word God has been anthropomorphized, and I don't buy into that. But as, you know, a omniscient universal concept, so to speak, it's ultimately non-falsifiable, but you could almost, you know, these morphic fields that of which there is evidence for could be a force of a so-called God, so to speak.
Have you heard of the concept of quantum immortality? Has anyone heard of the concept of quantum immortality? No?
Yes, I've heard of it.
Well,
do you believe it? True. Do you believe it has any concepts? So there's a guy here named Dex Rex who believes that he has died many times, but every time he dies, reality kind of splits and creates an alternate timeline where you did survive, and consciousness, being either matter or energy, cannot be created or destroyed because the laws of thermodynamics say neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed, but can only change form. So one way they could change form would be quantum, by translating to a different timeline. And so he believes, and he's a delusional kind of guy in a way, but he believes that he keeps trying to kill himself or dying or almost dying and coming to life. Exactly, quantum suicide theory, yeah.
Well, so I mean, here's
the thing, right?
He's a smart guy, right? But,
go ahead and say sorry, and then Dr.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, right? But he kind of just went off the he went into the Pink Floyd Shine On You Crazy Diamond aspect. Like, he just did a little too much and kind of went over the edge. There's no coming back from that too, because these ETs are able to witness, which is what he's interacting with. It's like a VR hyperspace, as he calls it, and it's cool. You can only see it while on drugs, technically, because otherwise it's just frequencies of light you can't see normally, but these drugs allow you to tap into it. It's kind of interesting, but go ahead, Doctor.
I'm sorry, I seen your mic queuing up and down. I thought you were done. Not to sound rude, I think that's, you know, calling somebody is off the deep end because of their personal beliefs, I think is a little ironic. That being said, the concept of
aliens.
It's not.
Come on.
Anyway, the concept of quantum immortality or consciousness, right? The idea that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. Is there any evidence for that? I say no, because we look at the 0 point, and subatomic particles are constantly popping into existence, and more coming into existence than are leaving. So the idea that matter can't be created or destroyed, or energy can't be created or destroyed, is also folly. It is created, and is created all the time from nothingness, and we have no idea why.
Yeah, well, I think I do have an idea why, right? Now, I have no possible scientific basis for this because I am not a natural scientist or anything like that. However, I just think consciousness is primary, consciousness is eternal. Matter is an epiphenomenon of consciousness rather than consciousness being an epiphenomenon of matter, meaning we thought that consciousness was an emergent phenomenon of matter, and that when matter was organized at higher levels of complexity, then eventually consciousness would emerge from non-conscious things. I would posit that the way in which consciousness produces and organizes matter is more equivalent to the ways in which we create our dreams at night. So when we dream, we use our brain, which is a form of quantum supercomputer, which is organic in nature, to instantaneously and effortlessly manufacture perceptually real, hyper-detailed, visually perceivable environments called dreams. So I would just simply postulate that everything that we experience is of that nature, so somehow we are in some kind of dream, whether that be of a god, a supercomputer, an alien mind, an alien supercomputer, an organic supercomputer, a brain in a jar. But somewhere, either a computer or a brain or a spirit is producing this, and it's unfalsifiable, but it's also logical, and we have analogies to it, because dreams are real, but also not real, according to us, only because we wake up from them. But on the other hand, we return to them every night, so you could just as easily say that this world is not real because every night we dream again, as to say that the dreams are not real because every day we wake up. There's no fundamental difference between waking up and falling asleep. You're just going back and forth between two permanent states of being, one called dreaming and one called being awake. So to believe that being awake is more real than dreaming is not logical. It's like saying night is more real than day, but both of them are inevitable and unavoidable.
So on the consciousness begetting reality versus reality begetting consciousness, why not both? Because it seems like if there was a consciousness that begot reality, that it would do well to cultivate consciousness within that reality to enrich itself.
Sure. I'm not sure exactly what you said, but I think I agreed with it.
Well, you were saying that most of the time people will posit that consciousness is simply subsets of matter that organizes a certain way, and then we call that to be conscious. And I agree with your point that I don't want to misrepresent it, but that possibly consciousness is what actually makes reality and the matter within it. So the matter is a property of consciousness, not necessarily the other way around. And I'm saying that both could be true simultaneously.
I agree. Up and down, down and up, right? And so some people take a top-down explanation, bottom-up, but they both happen at the same time. It's like the Hebrew Star of David. The upwards-facing triangle, the downwards-facing triangle, intersecting into one shape. It goes in all directions. And then the way I see it, everything must always be spherical, ultimately, because a sphere contains the maximum possible mass, energy, information. It's a shape, as far as I can understand. Because a sphere is an equal expansion in all directions from a central point. So therefore, a perfect system would function spherically. It's better than a circle. It's better than a pyramid. It's better than a triangle. A sphere is like the ultimate shape, which is, I believe, somehow why pyramids, suns, planets, moons are all spherical. But raindrops, I don't know. I feel like a sphere is the perfect shape.
I think that there's a purpose that a sphere would not be perfect for, and that is if you were trying to create compartments with not a lot of dead space. So stacking orbs is not the most efficient pattern because you're going to have a lot of dead space between them on the edges.
Well, we talked about Xenobots, DNA computers, organic machines. We talked about quantum stuff. Anyone have anything else they want to talk about? Very well, then. I guess we will conclude this episode here for now. I'm not sure how long we've been going, but I thought that was a good episode. So thanks very much, everybody.